Lano's taking care of you, Josh. You got a really nice chair tonight.
Caught him in the middle of a switch.
No, it was for him.
Not true. No, I didn't.
Not true.
Should be good.
True.
Went into a closet.
Yeah.
We just had that conversation. The previous council used to label chairs. So.
Well, only one council member that I know of tried to do that, but as I said, considering how many people sit in these chairs all week long, it's kind of silly. As I got a whole slug of them.
Like a drawer of wonder back there or something. Right?
Yeah, I just keep them handy.
Yeah. Okay, good evening and welcome to the February 3rd, 2025 study session. We will be talking about the Fieldhouse update. Start with the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brad Case, Parks and Recreation Director for the City of Lawrenceburg. We're excited tonight to update you and provide you with some information on the work that's been going on with regards to the Ellensburg Fieldhouse. We're kind of in the validation process right now, which is exploring lots of different options for a facility. People in the audience tonight, we have Jake Hartwig from the Winnahaw Group, along with Heath Gardner from the Winnahaw Group. They're our owner's advisor for the project. And then we have Jeff Blakowski from the Helix Design Group. He's online and he's been a part of this process from the beginning. So we're just going to kind of go through the information that we have and then hope to have a fairly lengthy conversation with council on kind of what the next steps are going to be. So the objective tonight is provide you with an update, review the plans and budgets that we've come up with, engage in council discussion with you, and then hopefully get some direction for the project as we try to move forward or have conversations about kind of what the next steps are. So just a little bit of history because we've been out of this for a while. Just want to make sure everybody understands where we've been and what we've done. As you all know, this process really started and ramped up in December of 2022 with a fire out at the Racket Center. After that happened, we entered into a contract with the Helix Design Group to perform some design work for a field house, and got some people together to talk about what they would like to see in the building. We also talked about how we're going to try to build this by potentially looking at alternative delivery methods, not your traditional design bid build. So in early 2024, after some conversations, we determined that the progressive design build option was the way that we wanted to go based on the budget that we had available to us and some of the uncertainty about how we're gonna build this thing. So as a part of that process, we had to hire outside counsel to assist us with the progressive design build because the city had never done this before. Also, as a part of that process, we have to hire the owner advisor, which is when we brought Winnahaw Group on board to help with that aspect of it. In May of 2024, we went through a review process through the state of Washington. A project review committee heard our project, heard our proposal, and granted us permission to move forward with this type of build, which is what you have to do if you've never built this as a municipality before. So what's unique about this way of building it is you hire your design team and your contractor up front. Everybody works collaboratively through the process, as opposed to kind of the traditional build way. So we hired Absher, which is a construction company, and the Helix Group to help us with that process. And in November of 2024, we started kind of drilling down on conceptual designs. And it was decided that, very early on, based on the money that we had available, that we were not going to be able to build the dream project that we had anticipated building, which was about 150,000 square feet. And certainly we couldn't build it in one fell swoop. And so we looked at, how do we build a building with the cash that we have on hand, from the insurance money, and then potentially from some other funding opportunities, both at a local, maybe at a state or federal level. And so we kind of targeted a $10 to $25 million budget, and we started designing buildings that could fit kind of that budget. The team has been meeting weekly since December, trying to come up with different concepts and different designs that would work for the community. And also really kind of drilling down on the budget and what it's going to cost to build the facility that we want to build. So not only build it, with, the construction money up front, but then also looking at the ongoing cost to maintain the facility and run programs, and then also what's the revenue on the other side from what we build. If we build something that can bring in, outside tournaments and different events and different activities, what are we looking at from a revenue standpoint? Because we want to be aware and cognizant of that as we're moving forward. The construction cost is a fraction of what the total expense of a building like this is going to be over the course of its lifetime. So we hired Ballard King. They're a firm that does this type of work to really look at, what we're proposing and come up with some budget numbers to help us kind of through that process. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the city manager, and she's going to provide us with some information about the project funding. And then we'll turn it over to our team from Winneha, and they'll go into the details of the different concept plans that we have before you tonight.
Good. Thank you, Brad. I just want to talk briefly about the project funding and to kind of set the stage for some of the decisions that we made with the design of the concepts you're going to see tonight. If you recall, as the insurance dollars came in, they proposed two different options. One was a replacement value, which is the highest value that they would provide, but we had to be under contract essentially and demonstrating that we were moving forward to rebuild within a 2-year period. And so that's what sort of pushed this project to, do we want to do this? There was almost $2 million worth of settlement dollars on the table if we did not choose to do so. And so we would have lost out on that. We were able, based on the early project work, to demonstrate our goodwill to replace the facility. So we were able to settle. So the settlement was right about in the $7.1 million. When we approached this, what council said is we can only rebuild what we can afford to do. And so we were looking at trying to maximize opportunities for grants. A number of those the doors have closed. And so we were in line for a congressionally directed spending, which actually got cut down to $500,000. And so as we're looking at state and federal opportunities for recreation type facilities, there really aren't a lot. And so we have had conversations with the county. And so they've been talking about some of their excess lodging tax that they might be able to partner on. They did include this facility in their capital improvement plan for the total of $3 million over 3 years. And so there may be a partnership out there, and that's how we got to the $10 million mark about cash in hand. And we've made some investments in the design and pre-design in order to get us to this space. And so we're kind of at a critical point where deciding how to move forward with this project is really important. So we're glad that we have some designs to talk to you about tonight, and then we'll have a discussion at the end. So I would open it up to Jake and Heath.
Okay, thanks for having us here tonight. I just want to make sure I express our appreciation. We really appreciate the opportunity to work for Ellensburg on this project, and we're really devoted trying to do best we can for you on it. We're the Winneha Group. We are your owners reps. I'm going to try to carry the torch here so that it goes fast, but Jake's going to interrupt me when I forget stuff. So we are your owners reps. Absher Helix is the design builder. I'm functioning as a spokesman tonight for the whole group, but really this is a lot of good work that Absher Helix did. Most of this work that's done in here is done by the estimators and designers at Absher and Helix. And they wanted me to pass along their appreciation as well. So I don't want to forget that. If we go next, do I do it? Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Just as a reminder, kind of more level setting, I guess, there was a master plan. Can you all hear me all right? There was a master plan for Rotary Park that is out there that the city uses. And I just want to clarify that all of the work so far has been done in the with the master plan in mind. So all the options we're going to show you tonight all work with this master plan. They would all work to further the master plan. They all fit where you need it to fit and everything else. So we won't talk a lot about that. The master plan is a master plan, but I just want to make sure you understand everything, all the options, they all fit with this. And then just another reminder, I know Brad already said, but there was an original dream that was out there. When we first came aboard, it had been conceptualized that the dream, probably we're calling it the Dream Project, sorry, it was about 150,000 square feet. So we knew that was going to be a challenge, but we didn't want to ignore it. So we did an estimate. That estimate came in at just over $63 million. And so quite a bit more than I think everybody had thought. So that's when we just did that so that you would know where that stands. So that was at 63 million. And of course, that takes us to all the concepts we went into. So we right away went into a whole bunch of different concepts. We're going to talk about 3 of them tonight. We developed at some level I don't know, at least 12, right? And we had a village of a bunch of separate buildings. We had all kinds of different things. And as a team, we came together to kind of narrow it down to 3. And what we're really looking for in discussion from you tonight is we're really hoping that you're going to help aim us, because we are in the middle of the validation phase and we want to deliver you a product at the end that is the very most useful product for you. And so we're really looking for you to just aim us where you want us to go, right? So we're hoping you may be able to narrow our focus a little and tell us, hey, focus on this or focus on that. We want to see this in the validation report. And then we're going to go away and finish the validation phase and bring back to you a validation report that will fully validate with all the information we can gather and come up with for the preferred concept or concepts. And that validation report will hopefully be a decision point for you to decide whether to go forward with the project or not. And hopefully it'll be a report that helps you be able to move forward with the project. That's the goal. So I'm just going to go right into these concepts. I did want to say we were working from this original 150,000, 63 million, and it was like, well, how are we going to get there? Are we trying to come up with a first phase that's maybe close to what you have of cash on hand, but then the full still design 150,000? Well, through a lot of conversation with the city leadership, and Heidi and Brad and David were big in this, but it was determined that, hey, what we really need to focus on is figuring out a $25 to $30 million total project that can be phased down to try to get as close to cash on hand as we can for a phase 1. So that's why all of these concepts you're going to see, they're all about 25 to 30 million, and they all have a first phase that represents the closest we thought we could get it with efficient construction inside that box. So, okay, that being said, concept A, all of these are right around 50,000 square feet. That's just how math worked out to get to that budget number. Concept A, I like to call this the little bit of everything concept. So the idea here is we have kind of these 2 separate objectives to meet, right? There's this turf field house concept, and then there's these hard courts concept. So this concept was developed to see, like, what would a facility look like that fits the target budget that has both, that tries to do both. So this tries to do both. I don't know if you can see my cursor. I can't see my cursor, but can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
So this light blue here, this would be phase 1 of this project. So phase one would be a single gym, regulation basketball court, and a small modest admin area, and reception area. That would be phase one. The total build, phase one would be 12,500 square feet. The total build would get you 2 courts and then a turf field house. The turf on this one, I'm going to talk back and forth a little bit maybe, is 40 yards, right, Jake? 40 yards of turf. So previous. This fits the budget. It's about 28 million, we'll call it. These numbers are before tax. So you got to remember there's going to be tax on top of these. Full project be 28 million. This phase one gets us the closest to your cash on hand of any of the options. Okay. And with tax, this gets a little bit bigger, and it's about 200,000 more than the total that Heidi adds up if you get the 3 million from the county. Just as a level set there. And then phase two would be 18 million. The phase one and phase two don't add up to be the full project because it's going to be more expensive to build it in 2 separate phases. Then Ballard King was brought on under the design builder. They specialize in recreational facilities. They were working on several projects with them. They're industry leaders in being able to establish budgets and projections for revenues and costs. They are weighing in with their draft. Now, part of the finish of the validation is going to be getting really dialed in on this. So when we validate the option you want us to focus on, we're going to dial these numbers in, so they might change. But in the draft, they think it's going to cost about $1 million to run this place, and it may bring in about $628K. So that's a percentage of cost recovery of 61%.
Could I ask one quick question? My curiosity is the expense and revenue projection based on the full build out or phase one?
That's what I was just gonna say. It's the full build out. This is the full build out. And because it's a draft, that's all we have at this point.
We pushed them for this stuff before this, but they'll have some more time with the total validation, and we'll get dialed in on those phases too. But this would be that. And they talk about cost recovery a lot in their world, right? It's about cost recovery because a lot of these recreational facilities don't cover their own costs, and they have to be subsidized in some form. And as a result, they talk about cost recovery a lot. Yes.
What's your dollar per square foot on this option? Rough
Oh,
idea.
what is it?
750?
500?
Or 400 and something.
Divided by 50,000.
I'll have to do the math. I forgot. I did the math, but now I can't remember. We'll just call it 28 million.
We can get that for you.
One of the other things I want to make sure that we bring up with
A
this,
little over 500.
if there's city needs that we're not meeting, say that you like this, you like the initial phase one of this, but you'd rather have all hard courts. That validation can move that direction also.
Yeah.
So, and we'll get into that here as we go.
So I try to move along here. This has the least expensive phase one. It provides a little bit of something for everyone. The thing that we note about it is it's nobody's dream, right? So like the 40 yards of turf isn't like the dream turf facility, right? And the 2 courts isn't the dream court facility, but it gets you a little bit of everything. The separation of space with this one's kind of nice for multiple programs. This does not, the ability to expand is a little bit challenging with this one, but it still can be expanded. When we say it's challenging to expand it, we're really talking about the turf facility. If you build a turf facility with 40 yards and then you decide later to grow it to 100, it certainly can be done, but there's a lot of things that are going to be thrown away in that process. It's inefficient to do that. That's what we're trying to point out to you there. And then all of these concepts we think could still be built out into your ultimate dream eventually, right? You could keep building on to these things. That field house could get way bigger. You could add courts to the other side. So the concept was not to lock you into something that you can't build onto. Concept B is an attempt to build the best court focused facility we could build. So with this, the full build out would have 5 courts, it'd have an ample admin area. Also, a need that arose was to have a multi-purpose room that could be rented out and used for smaller groups and events, maybe, dance or yoga or even meetings or things like that. And this one fits in there, that multi-purpose. In the first concept, there was multi-purpose, but it's not till phase 2, right?
Phase 2 is when.
This one, right about 29.6 million. It's 51,000 square feet. This one has a 55% cost recovery in the draft report. I'm hoping we're going to increase those percentages when we really dial in, because I think there's a lot of assumptions that we're going to challenge as we go forward, but the draft says 55%. This gets you pretty close. It's a really efficient use of space. It's a big square box. It lends itself to phasing really well. You could add a field house with turf onto it. You could add more courts. It really gets you close to being, it's really kind of a really good court facility, right? 5 courts isn't too shabby, and it's a pretty good court facility. I think when we're talking with Brad and David, if when you think about the courts that you have access to through the schools, this would double that amount if you had 5. Or close to it anyway.
And they'd be
And
they'd be under your control.
So it's a good facility. We think the court facility allows for the best programming because you could do more with courts than you can with the turf. Different needs, but more different uses. And you could certainly host tournaments in this facility with 5 courts. The real distraction with this is you're not meeting the turf need at all. So concept C, this is what's the best turf facility we could build? So this is turf. To do the full build out with 50,000 square feet, you get 70 yards of turf, which we think is pretty usable. It's not like everybody would love to have 100 yards and end zones, but 70 yards is pretty good. You can get a lot of use out of that. This might not be everybody's dream, but you can get a lot of use out of it. This just isn't feasible, really, right? You'd either build this or you'd circle back to something smaller, and maybe you want to entertain that. But the thought of the team was, if you're going to build a smaller turf, you might as well go back to that concept A, or the thought would be like build the most you can. And you don't want to build half the turf and then phase it for all the reasons we said before. You'd be throwing out a lot of stuff. This has a 45% recovery, which is the lowest recovery. But the costs are different too to run the facility. What I miss? You can expand it with courts or other turfs. It's only if you want to 70, do we want to add 30 yards? That's inefficient, but it can be expanded. You don't meet the hard court need at all with this. I think you're limited in what you can host in it if you're trying to host as a revenue source. So I'm going to turn it back over to Heidi here, but I just want to remind you that we're really here to discuss. We want to hear your thoughts, and we're hoping to hear from you kind of where you want us to go. So, Heidi.
Okay.
Thank you, Jake and Heath. And Council, I just wanted to pose a few questions, and I will not go through these. Really, this is about your questions and your discussion. As we prepared this, the question has been, okay, how much can we afford? And again, we've closed the door on some of the outside funding. We recognize that there's not a primary source that will come in and help us with this, and so we would be looking for local revenue. As you know, we have another item on your council agenda tonight talking about the need for other revenue. There are always competing priorities. In your 2025 budget, it's time to update your parks plan. So we have dollars set aside to do that and to do the discussion that we've been talking about, to talk about new revenues and parks priorities and things like that. And so that is a kind of a year-long process and would potentially, we could be asking the community for what are their priorities, including the field house with this. We do have cash in the bank for this. It doesn't mean it needs to be spent today or tomorrow. But this is the method we've chosen to process and to help us answer some questions about what do the dollars in hand get us? And is that the best way to deliver this service to the community? So in the meantime, we have had some conversations. Some private builders have approached us and said, this is really expensive. Is there an opportunity to do something different? And so there is a possibility of exploring other options. We know there are options to do lease. It means that the city wouldn't own a building, but there may be another method to actually provide for this type of facility, but isn't something that the city owns. And so we can continue. Tonight, we're not asking you to make a decision, but to provide some guidance, and we can bring any actionable items back to you at a full meeting. So really opportunities now. You have some folks who have been with this project in a very detailed way for the last year and a half, and they're happy to answer some questions.
Council.
Yeah, I got a couple of comments and / questions. First, remind me how many courts did we have in our previous facility before it burned down?
We had 2 tennis courts. We had 1 full-size soccer or indoor soccer field that was the equivalent of a tennis court. We had a 4th tennis court that was converted into a gymnastics area, and then we had 4 racquetball courts, one of which was a weight room.
Okay, so remind me total square footage of
Yeah,
that.
about 28,000 square feet, I believe. Yeah.
28,000 square feet. So at a bare minimum, that would be a target that I would say that we would want to try to achieve with the first phase, which from these numbers is not feasible. The second is, or just comment question to what Heidi was just talking about, definitely interested in alternate options for maximizing dollars for actual space. So if that's a lease, we should at least look at it. Doesn't necessarily mean that's the right solution, but we should have looked to see what that entails. The draft operation costs, that's the other part of this that I'm trying to wrap my head around. When your revenue doesn't match your expenses, I'm hearing some ideas as far as trying to offset that. Could you expand upon that? Because I see that as we're operating in the red.
And that's very typical for all of our parks programs. And so, yeah, we will find that a lot of our public services that we do not, and we cannot do a full recoup of fees.
You want to lose money, open a pool.
I'm well aware.
I think it's fair to say that our racket center, even though we didn't come by it, with a lot of initial expense, wasn't operating in the black either.
Okay.
Yeah, I think as a comparison, I think the racket center, the highest return that we got on our expenditures was about a little over 52% one year. So we were well in the red, but our budget was much lower than this too.
What was our operating?
It was like 100 at one point we had 2 full-time employees out there. So we're about 160,000, I think, at the highest. So it was, but we also, the council approach to that one was we're going to, from a budget standpoint, not a council approach necessarily, but, we did not throw a lot of money at that facility. We kept it in the 1979 condition that it was, and we kind of limped along, and it was one of those things where it's like, we're thankful that we have it, and we're going to fund it at its lowest amount possible.
I asked.
Just step up.
I do think as we dial in on those validations, I really think we're going to improve those numbers because after reading Valerie King's report, there's some assumption there. I just believe that your Parks and Rec department are going to run it leaner than they're anticipating.
Sure.
And cut those costs.
So I was going to ask how much of the cost of these alternatives is site prep? The road, the parking lot,
Each one of these does have just so you know, there is a line item estimate for these things. So it's not just it's not just a square foot number. There's actual data behind it. I could get you that information. I'd have to add all that up as far as site, but we are carrying in the soft cost portion, we're carrying a pretty good chunk of money for the road and utilities that need to be built to continue what Winco has done. But there's some good news about that. Winco seems to be building it completely out to the property line. So we're probably going to be able to reduce that as we go forward and finish this process. We're probably going to be able to reduce that and push some more money into construction potentially.
I also wanted to ask about, so my understanding is community schools is not operating. We don't have access to those courts. Is that true?
We have access to the school district facilities, yes.
You do?
We have an interlocal agreement with the district.
Okay.
And that agreement specifies that the district has obviously priority use for those facilities. We don't use all of the facilities because we have other programs in our community, such as AAU basketball or club volleyball. So we do have access to facilities. We don't have access to them all. And again, it's outside of the school hours. And so we cannot run programs during the day. And then we also have some limitations in terms of when we can use them. Oftentimes we'll get, we have a good relationship with the district, but oftentimes things come up last second. We're canceling programs at the last minute because there's a conflicting school use for something. But we don't have any place in our community where you can just go drop in any time of the day and have a recreational facility at your fingertips. And so yeah, not only for programs that we run, but also for just general city use. I think that's it, obviously what we're trying to target.
And is there any opportunity to partner with Central for any of their facilities, or are they all, certainly they're going to take priority times, but are they ever not?
I can't speak on behalf of the entire university, but we're not at that point right now. I don't think there's chances in the future. But yeah, maybe.
There are groups that rent court space in the circ. I know for the pickleball programs and some of those before some private facilities were built. So they've had access, groups have had access to central facilities, but it does come at a rental cost, which is understandable.
What's the biggest need, the courts or the turf?
That depends who you ask, probably.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
What was
gonna ask
used
Brad that
used
question.
most at the
Yeah,
old one?
I think as the programs that we currently run within our department, we would use the hard courts more than we would use the soft. And you can program more activities, more numbers on the hard courts than you can on the turf. I think when we look at the turf, whether we're looking at a 40-yard facility or a 70-yard facility, it's more kind of as a training facility than anything else, or a team practice facility, not a large group event where you have a tournament or even a recreational leagues per se. We could run indoor soccer. You'd have one or two fields out there potentially. You'd have the rugby team going out and using it for practice, but you're not going to have the volume necessarily. But as with any recreational amenity, it depends who you ask. We don't have indoor turf in our community other than what's up at Central. And so when you look at kind of the pros and cons list of what we've shown you, we have gym space in our community. We don't have it at our fingertips, but we do have that available to us. We don't have the turf. And that's an argument that the turf community is going to make, saying, we already have gyms. So I guess, right now, from a programmatic standpoint, we would benefit more as a department to have hard court facilities.
Could I ask a question? Or go ahead if you're still going. I was going to ask a follow-up.
It's totally off the topic of the courts.
Well, I'll stay on the courts for a
Okay, go
second,
ahead.
if you will. Yeah. So I understand the difference I get it. The different there's a lot of varieties of hardcore, right? There's a lot of surfaces, and they're not all interchangeable or suitable for all sports. So what I'm not seeing in any of the concepts are tennis courts. And I guess we know what's planned long-term for Mountain View Park, but given that the facility that we are trying to replace had hard surface tennis courts, was that a conscious choice to go for basketball courts?
I think we
rather
were
than
looking
tennis
at,
courts?
we were looking at a court surface that could have, this shows basketball, but in reality, we're talking basketball, we're talking volleyball lines, we're talking pickleball courts potentially. And you could do tennis court lines on that as well. You start getting a lot of lines on a small
the
area, it
same
becomes a little bit
surface.
on the same surface. Because at the old field house up at Central, they did indoor tennis on the field house, just a rubberized court. I think the tennis community would be grateful for an opportunity to play tennis indoors, whether it be a true hard court tennis surface or something that's a little bit more multi-use. To do a true tennis court surface, you're not going to be able to do too many other activities on there just because of the surface. Doesn't lend itself well for that. But we did look at the option for tennis courts as well.
So just for context off, concept A,
Yep.
how large is a tennis court compared to one of those basketball courts?
Tennis court's about
Multiples?
it's about 120 feet long by 60 feet wide.
Relative to the boxes, can we fit one tennis court inside one basketball court or
No.
multiple tennis courts?
No, it's not long enough.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that doesn't really
No.
work either. Okay, all right. Okay.
Couple questions, Jack, Keith, regarding construction. Are you guys assuming an IMP open structure or insulated metal panel for those in the audience? Open
Yeah,
span?
pre-engineered metal building is kind of the assumption.
Okay.
We kicked around some other things, but really the general consensus is that's going to be the least expensive and most efficient.
And then heating system that you planned on this?
Big package units, yeah. And they'll sit off the end.
Ground mounted?
Yeah, ground mounted. Yep. Sit off the end so we can just slope the roofs. Yep.
Right.
Trying to keep it as simple as possible. Yep.
Understood. Okay.
And for those of you that are used to hearing square foot numbers on buildings, the price, because it's a design build, if you take and divide that, you get a little over $500. That includes design and
Understand.
some contingencies and stuff. So
Yep.
different than.
So I guess, if you're looking for direction, I am very interested in the option for, some sort of private partnership and leasing. I'm leery about that in a couple of different ways, but I would like to explore that as a business model. Obviously that potentially affects the initial construction cost, but there's a profit built in for whoever's leasing the building to us. So some of that gets given back. It's obviously easier for a private contractor to build something than it is for government. Cheaper.
Yeah.
So I get that. I would lean towards A or B if we're trying to provide direction. Given the fact that we're 20 plus minutes out, and I know we have some people in the audience who are very invested, I would entertain a motion to amend our study session rules and take short comments from the public. But we have to amend our rules because our rules don't allow that in study session.
I'll make that motion. A motion to amend our rules in our study session to allow public comment.
Second.
Motion second to allow public comment. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I tool vote aye, opposed. And that motion passes. We'll provide 3 minutes for each member of the audience that wishes to speak, including online. And I'm going to cut us a little short as we get close to 7 o'clock, so we don't have a panic. So anybody in the audience?
Have time for us to discuss at the end of the public comment?
I'll stop the public comments early.
Thank you.
Anybody in the audience wish to speak?
So I don't exactly know what,
I'm sorry, go ahead and introduce
oh,
yourself.
Jennifer Patterson, live in
Speaking
the
for
county.
yourself, city resident,
For
county
myself,
resident.
county resident.
Okay.
So I like the concept that has more of the court space versus the turf space, but I don't know that your last comments there, I think you were saying, so like you're looking at maybe having an independent person build it and then you guys would rent it back. Is that how that was looking?
Our presentation
Potentially.
included that option, yes.
Okay, so I would go for bigger is always better. And I think that you could sell that more to the people. As somebody who goes to lots of volleyball games in tournaments, 5 courts isn't enough. You go a little bit bigger, at least 6 courts, you can rent that out year round. Your return on investment should be quick. And then basketball. I think the turf surface is really important and I think that could be a big selling to the community too, but I realize that's expensive, but if we can get some private person to come in and help us out, I think let's go for bigger.
Thank you. Anybody else? I knew I was gonna get Pat.
Pat Kelleher, 6530 Wilson Creek Road. The one that concerns me is the expenses and revenues. And you look at what was spent on the old Vantage property, we were saying 160 in expenses with 50, so 80,000 in revenue. And now you're jacking up to 628,000 in revenue with 1 million in expenses. So you're carrying 400,000 expense, which is, for a 10x. The in 628,000 in revenue. I mean, I would be interested in how you're going to obtain that. I think more of a model for this type of facility is like a Anytime Fitness that, a subscription model with low labor expenses. But I think that's a pretty big hole you're digging. Thank you.
Anybody online? Okay, close public comment.
I guess I'd like to just say there's a reason private entrepreneurs don't usually do this kind of building. I'd love to explore a public-private partnership and a leaseback arrangement but I'm just not, I guess I'm not optimistic that anyone else can make that pencil out if we can't, other than the building costs are going to be substantially less. But the operations, perhaps not. I guess I'm interested in looking at this project more holistically as part of the parks plan and because I think we need to weigh this project against the need for a pool and our other parks and recreation activities and facilities. So we're not, I don't think we can look at this in isolation. And I think the parks planning process gives us the opportunity. So I would be in favor of putting this building project on hold and exploring our leasing options, exploring our park planning process, through our park planning process, what people want to do, what's a priority, pool versus field house, and other priorities.
I agree with most of that, but what do we give back if we don't build something? For the
We don't,
insurance
we
settlement.
closed the settlement. It's all done. So the cash in hand is all that
You can
we'll
use
get.
for
and
anything, doesn't have to be the field house.
That's correct.
Okay.
Also in favor of seeing what all alternate options are out there. When it comes to the construction or the use of this facility, I'm interested in finding out what is our comfort level with kind of the membership cost to kind of offset some of the expenses, because that also is a concern for me as far as the revenue versus expenses. I get that these types of facility typically operate in a red. I guess my logic is kind of out there in the fact that there's not a single one in the entire country that operates in a black as these type of facilities. That's just the normal thing. Wow. Okay. All right.
Our return on the pool is something around 30% or less.
Yeah.
I think because of the intangibles is what it pays
I
off, right? I
totally
mean,
understand.
we have, we're buying somewhere for our youth to
Yep.
exercise. We're
Yep.
buying health for our community. We're buying a lot of things.
Totally understand. I am a proponent of whatever is going to maximize the amount of use of a facility, whether that is building so more courts versus the turf, because again, we're talking about more teams that are on a court, pickleball, basketball, whatever it is, as opposed to a turf condition. And when I see a turf condition that's only 40 or 70 yards, then trying to bisect that into playable fields that you'll have multiple tournaments is not going to work. Even at 100 yards, you're still going to have some difficulty associated with it. So the court option seems like the more logical option, but I would like to see, what a lease option does look like. What is a tentative lifespan of this type of facility? 30 years or 50 years? Do you know?
No, I don't really. I would think it would be somewhere in the 30-year
Okay.
mark.
And the only reason why I'm asking for the 30-year mark is that will help us to make some rational decisions regarding lease agreements. If we're looking at that, if it's 30 years as opposed to 50 years, then it might be a little bit more palatable from a lease arrangement cost.
To ask a question. I'm wondering on the revenue projections that you have here, what did you figure into that?
So that was all done by Ballard King. So they're doing it. They do this all over the nation with all kinds of these. So right now we're operating on their kind of, hey, this is what's normal, right? But I can tell you, just looking at some of the detail, that let's see this for one of the concepts here that I opened up to. Yeah, so concept A, the anticipated revenue is about 592,000, and I can tell you 129,000 of that is admission fees, like people who buy memberships or daily use of the facility, and then about 300,000 of it is recreation programs or fitness programs. And then about 156,000 of that is like birthday parties, facility rentals, and sponsorships. So, and that's all broken down in their report. And part of our validation will be a very detailed report of that. We just didn't want to put all that up here on the screen, but there is data behind it. You guys are welcome to even this draft one if you want it distributed or whatever. There's data there.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I agree in terms of looking at what other opportunities we have. I think Councilmember Lillquist was right on that. The one thing I would just caution about, just from my own 20 years in consulting, I have seen analysis paralysis seize up projects, and then we spend lots of money, looking for these answers. We're already $700,000 into this one. And so it's kind of what others have echoed in terms of just let's be real mindful of the money and let's not overanalyze. But at the same token, nothing here just jumps out I don't know that we're going to get a perfect answer. We won't, because we don't have $63 million to spend on it. That's all I caution is analysis paralysis.
So I guess from my perspective, to potentially move this along, it feels like for the most part, we're acknowledging that the courts give us, a more intense use and more flexibility and potentially a little bit higher percentage of return on investment, although those numbers are probably flawed. Is there any comfort in, pushing one of these forward and say, yes, we're interested in something like this so that we can begin to move forward, or are we not there?
I have a hard time spending $10 million on one court.
That's A.
It's B2.
I'm with Nancy on that. I definitely I like concept B as far as a total project, but yeah, dropping that much money on one court is, wow. LeBron better be playing there.
I mean, it was a hard thing to, with a straight face. And then the operation cost is not going to be that much less for one court than 4 courts.
Yeah.
So I think we pause. I mean, I don't think we invest more money in the analysis. I think we invest in our park plan and take this to the people and ask them what they think. And so.
I would not disagree. I think there are a couple of unique features about this. If we look at what we've spent in our parks over the last 10 or 15 years, we've spent a lot of money in Rotary Park because of it's sort of a unique feature of the community, but it's also one of our few parks that draws users in from out of town, right? So this facility is unique in that regard, say compared to the pool. And, as that ties into economic development and drawing people into the community, there could be a lot of different ways to look at that. You would not get the same bang for the buck, I suspect, if we were building, a second North Ellensburg Park, for example, just with green space. And it'd be great for the community, but it wouldn't have that same economic impact, I guess. The other thing too is I'm okay with pausing. I like the idea of looking at our total park needs across and to the extent that the parks master planning process gets us some of that information, I think that's good. But I also think that, we've accumulated about $7.5 million of revenue through various means. I suspect if we let this opportunity go, we'll never get that close again to funding a project of this magnitude out of pocket. So it does make me a little nervous to hear that the money that we've acquired through our settlement and the other projects in pursuit of this project is unencumbered and could be used for any purpose the council or any future council decides is worthy. I think that's a challenge in and of itself, So I like B within the choices. I think the hard courts versus the turf probably the way to go. I'd like to know more about it. But yeah, I think somewhere in our staff report for later, there's a term called structural imbalance, and it was used to refer to our funding mechanisms for streets and transit and everything else. It strikes me that we've got a funding imbalance in parks as well. We're nowhere near getting arms around that. So it may be a good time to pause and look at that.
Well, I'll just add, I do agree that this is not going to get any cheaper if we spend a year on park planning. So I can be persuaded if everyone wants to move forward, but.
So you think it would take a year to go through that process of park planning?
Yeah, we would try to have that adopted by council by March 1 of next year.
I think my take on that process is that we will get, as Councilman Lundquist mentioned, I think we would get, and it would be great to get a lot of public input on our community's priorities, right? And we could probably have a fairly decent idea of what the total cost of all that looks like.
Yeah.
We know the pool is going to be this expensive or more. And the dollars are just going to go up and they're going to get into the stratosphere and it's going to be like, okay, we're going to be able to do one thing. Somebody needs to decide what that's going to be or something. It'll be a conversation that I suspect in a year, there won't be any clear consensus. There'll be a lot of disagreement about, no, I want this. So we would, as Josh said, we could spin our wheels analyzing it, come up with a lot of information and be exactly where we are a year from now or 2 years from now.
Maybe as a compromise, can we look at what a private project would look like for A or B and get an idea what the actual construction cost would be and what our lease and those kinds of things might look like?
Yeah. Let's
I
get
don't
that.
know that it's half, but
So I guess
as soon as we get away from prevailing wage and some other things that privates can do that public can't, things get significantly less expensive.
yeah, my question, what I was thinking about on that was with our reserve, we'll call it reserve. It's not a reserve, but the cash that we have on hand, would the concept be that because we don't have to invest in a building up front, we would work off of that to fund the operating costs for as long as we could? Or would that money just vanish and go somewhere else? And then we'd be looking at covering this hole. That's a question I think we need to ask and answer. So I don't know.
So is council willing to look at that before we sort of put this on hold for a year?
Yeah, the lease option.
Yes.
Let's look at the least option for, can we say option B? And just so we have something to model it after, so we're not asking for.
So it was mentioned in the presentation that the costs, the operating and the operating revenues and expenses are kind of rough grade estimates at this point, and they can be further refined. Is there not some value in getting more refined numbers? So we're looking at the same level of certainty.
So we're gonna have some more information on some of the lease options as well.
Well, but that'll be a whole separate evaluation, I assume, right? We're talking public versus private. And our consultant is not tasked with, I assume, is not tasked with coming up with private development scenarios. So apples and apples comparisons would be good.
So this would be a,
Cost analysis to run those.
to run a facility, no matter whether it's in something we own or something we lease.
Well, that'd just be the operating side, right? And then whatever the cost for the lease
Yeah.
is, yeah.
That's fine.
Is that reasonable?
Yeah.
Is there a consensus on council that that has some value?
Really love with that.
I think so.
One of the things that I was thinking as we were talking, in the park plan, is there room for private partnerships there also?
To talk about models, we can look at anything in our parks plan. Typically, again, it's just a high level plan about what the long-term community needs and goals are.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate it.
We're going to adjourn the study session.